Okay, so I've got some lights working on my ground floor, but now I want to go and put some lights in on the upper story. And so I made that ceiling previously, which I can see here in the section, and if I go to my level 1 ceiling plan, I can see there as well. Now I don't want this to go across that entire level, so I'm going to go and edit that ceiling and just have it on part of the level. So this might do. Maybe just up to touch one of them like that. Okay, but I then want to still be able to place lights onto these ceiling joists. Also, they're rafters, actually. And so, to change that into a ceiling, you'll see if you hover over it, it's actually set as structural framing. So, while it's selected, I'm going to choose Edit in Place. And then now I can go to Family Category and Parameters, which is one of those kind of not very well known settings, but you have it for every family in Revit. In the Properties panel at the beginning, you've got those 4 buttons there. It's the one on the top, on the right. Family Category and Parameters there will let you change the category to ceilings. And okay, let's see if I get that error. We're going to get it for a lot of these. That's a bit painful. So I'm just going to try if I delete them. No, it's not going to let me. Okay, this does happen a little bit, and it's because I think I've loaded them from another an earlier project. That's probably a bit painful. I've changed it before. This was done in an earlier version of Revit. I think it's going to have issues with that. Okay, so if that happens, you'll need to put in the lights in a different way. Now, so let's see one of the options down here. Let's like just try one little thing to make this work. Just going to try quickly making a new family. This normally wouldn't be a problem, but in older versions of Revit things are a bit different. No. Okay, so that's not going to work, unfortunately. And I might, well, I'll remake that family for you maybe as a ceiling, but it's something that we can't do quickly. So another trick though is to use the ceiling that I made before. Okay, so you can see this ceiling sits right on the underside of the rafters there. So I'm just going to change the thickness there by stretching it, so that the face of the ceiling sits on the rafters. And then in my ceiling plan, I can place lights. So I'm going to use the same downlight slot, and you can see there it's going to let me place a light in that area because I've got a ceiling there. So I'll just put a few of those in. It's a good opportunity actually to show you how to rotate these, because that's something I didn't show you before. I'm going to put a few in. You can see there I'm lining up with the rafters on purpose. So there we go, that'll do. And then when you select one of those lights, you can use the spacebar to rotate them. Yeah. It won't work while you're placing them. For some families it does, but it depends on the family. And it's not a bad thing actually, because this way you can see more clearly which way the light's pointing. Okay, so I've got there, if I go into the section as well, should have a pretty good indication, but I'm going to go to wireframe. So that's the one that I've rotated. And so that's the wrong way, that's the right way. And I can do that with all of them now. Okay, so they're not quite lined up exactly, but that's close enough for now. So then the final thing, when I go into the perspective view on that level, I'll just make a new one. Okay, so I can see those lights there, but then the ceilings are getting in the way of my nice rafters that I want to have exposed. So the final thing you can do there is simply hide the ceiling in that view. So that way you're using the ceiling to host the lights, but then you're hiding it. The lights will stay on. So you can see there the lights are still there. And of course I've got them in my, my collar ties, so I'd have to move them down further. But that's not a problem. I can just go back into the section and do that. And notice how when you move them, they're going to follow the ceiling. You don't need to follow the angle. Okay, so you can see then my lights. And okay, so it is a bit of a challenge getting lights to go in on those more complex things like rafters and joists, but you can always achieve it in the end. So then also on this level I've got windows, and I want to get some light from the sun to go through those windows, and that's one of the main things I still wanted to show you. So you all know from what you've done previously, and probably just from general life experience, that the north direction of true north is going to give you the direction of your sunlight generally. And so in Revit you've got a true north floor plan that you use to set true north. Okay, and so again, if you're interested, on the Manage tab, you can go to, under Project Location, you've got an option there to rotate true north. But if your building's oriented the same way mine is here, that means north is this direction here. And so that means, because we've got the windows along the north wall there, that we're going to get pretty decent light through those windows. And so that's a good way to have true north anyway. But it's just something you need to check. So, so make sure you at least have a look in your true north view and see the direction north is. So now that I know which way true north is, I can go back into my perspective view, and then down on the view control bar you've got sun settings. So it's a little sun button that you click on first, and then you'll see at the top sun settings. Don't worry about those other options. Sun path on and off, you never use those, so just ignore those, but sun settings you use all the time. So once you go to sun settings, you'll see it'll be on the left hand side, it'll be on lighting. To get the sun direction you need to choose still. And then just click OK. Oh, no, well, sorry. Yeah, I'll click OK. And it's made no change because we don't have any shadows. So now I'm going to turn the shadows on, and I can see then fairly clearly that the light is coming through those windows. So then I'm going to go back to sun settings and start adjusting this. If you're still not used to the way the light changes throughout the year and at different times of the day, this is a really good way to learn it. I learnt how the sun moves by doing shadow diagrams. So in summer, let's go to December. What time do you think the sun rises roughly in summer? 5 or 6, yeah. And so if we go down to say 6 o'clock, that should be after sunrise. And then I'm just going to press apply. And so now I can see the sun coming from the windows at the front. That's the the east side. And then if I increase the time there, so I'm going to take that up to say 9 o'clock, hit apply, and now the sun's coming from the northeast, which isn't going to give us great sun actually. So I'm going to go and increase that even more, and go to midday. So by midday it should have come around from rising in the east to being from the north. Apply. Well, it's coming in there, but only just. You can see there it's coming in slightly on the windows. So that's right, exactly. And that's the other thing to think about. In summer, the sun is actually less, usually, than what you get in winter. And it's something that you can easily take advantage of, but you'd be surprised how often people mess it up by trying to put skylights in and things like that on the north face, and they get all the sun coming in then in summer when they don't want it, and then none in winter when they do want it. So so what do we do to get the sun at more of an angle? Yeah, exactly. So it's, yeah, we'll go for spring. Yep. Yep. And so now we can see the sun at least gets in through the window and reaches the floor at midday. If we go back to winter, then we're going to get fairly steep angles for the sun. And that's something you can really take advantage of in your designs. Passive solar is a huge thing in all design fields at the moment. So yeah, this is passive solar. So active solar is a totally different thing, but passive solar just means basically using natural sunlight. Not necessarily. You do need to turn it on, but once you've got a certain setting, you can. There's a way of saving it and. Yeah, well, what you can do is see here. We've got these different presets. Just like anything else in Revit, you can duplicate one of those. So just select, say, summer. Let's go for winter solstice. And then if you click on the two pages, which is your duplicate button down the bottom, and then instead of one of those sun names, I'm going to give it a name to do with my render. So I'll just call it render sun. Okay, so this is my special sun set up just for rendering. And then I can say, right, I want the rendering to all have sunlight at, say, 2 in the afternoon in the middle of winter. Yeah, then that'll do. So that means now I can go to another view and just choose render sun. Yeah. All right, so then I'm going to bring this view out a little bit so that you can see the light from the other windows. Oh, what's that? Oh, I've got my stairs coming up there. I'll just hide that for now. Okay, so to render with the sun, when you go to your render dialog, the best one at first is just to try rendering with the sun only and no artificial light. So I'm going to go to interior sun only, hit render, and you can see all this nice natural light coming in. But notice it's really dark outside of those brightly lit areas. You can do a little bit with the exposure to make that brighter, but the real problem there isn't the exposure, it's the quality and also the material. So this material is really causing a problem now, so I'm going to have to go and adjust that before I can go too much further with the lighting. And so there is a bit of an interplay between the lighting and the materials, because the light obviously is going to be bouncing or reflected off your materials. And so quite often you will need to adjust those to progress with your lighting. So I'm just going to quickly go back to materials with this floor, edit type, edit for the structure, and there's my wood timber material that I made earlier, wood timber floor. I'm going to browse there, change this, and so it's set up for the graphics, which you might remember we did before, but then in appearance it's not set up very well. It's got a floorboard material, but it's not really a great one, and the main problem is actually this semi-gloss finish that it has. Right, so I'm going to go and find a different one using replace this asset, and I'm going to go into the appearance library and find in flooring wood a more a smoother wood. So I'm looking for ones that don't have too much obvious grain here in this preview. And this might do, the maple. And then the satin varnish there I'll change to unfinished. And just to check that image size, I'm going to change this view to realistic. And well, look, any timber pretty much, as long as it doesn't have the finish set to glossy or anything like that. So I'm going to show you the difference that'll make when I render. Okay, so notice the speckles and things like that on the ground aren't so bad. The other issue is the quality. So if I go up to medium now, not only is it going to be smoother, but it's going to have more light in those areas. And it's also going to render faster because the glossy reflections, blurred reflections, actually take longer to render and more calculations than smooth reflections or no reflections at all. And so notice how now I haven't changed anything with the lighting and I haven't changed anything else, but the whole thing is much brighter just by increasing the quality. So sunlight can be a little bit difficult to work with at first, but once you get used to it, it's a really good light source. It's going to make this a bit darker. And what you want to be looking for with sunlight is a visible material in the bright areas, in those bright spots. So you don't want these to be fully exposed or fully white. So I've got to have a pretty high exposure value there to get that to come up. That's probably about what I'd want. And so now I'm going to try rendering with the sun and artificial. Because I've got lights there, I should be able to get this interior to be brighter using those lights. Now this can take a while to render because it's got the sun and then all those artificial lights to calculate as well. Okay, so they're doing something, but it's pretty subtle, the effect of those artificial lights. And it's something that you might expect, because if you've taken photos on a bright day, maybe looking towards an area where the lights are turned on, or even just looking at things with your eyes, it's hard to tell sometimes that the lights are on. if the sun is shining brightly, man-made light sources are nowhere near as bright as the sun. And so that's a common situation. So in an area that's directly lit by the sun, it's sometimes hard to tell that the lights are even on, just because the sun is so much brighter. So all you can do to get those lights to show up is increase the brightness. Right, so here you can see I've got my spotlights. So I'm just going to go to Edit Type and Duplicate. So they call it the same, but with bright at the end. So I don't want to go too far with this, but I just want to give you an idea about adjusting the brightness of your lights. So it's down the bottom. With any light, you'll have this option. It's not the light loss factor or the initial colour, it's the initial intensity. So over here, so down towards the bottom again, you'll see that initial intensity. I don't know why they bothered putting initial intensity there. They should have just called it intensity, I think. Might have been clearer. And so technically it's correct, but you know, like a lot of things in Revit, it doesn't need to maybe be like that. And so when you click on that, you'll see it's probably going to be set to watts. And have you had a lighting subject? No, you probably don't get a lighting subject anymore, do you? No, they've taken it out, I think, decoration. Yeah, no, it used to be part of decoration, but I think they've taken it out with the new course. So, yeah, thank the government again. Anyhow, so the lighting intensity anyway is here set in watts. And that's probably something you would have seen if you've ever changed a light bulb, that the light's in watts. But does that tell you how bright a light is? Yeah. Sort of. Well, does it? Yeah, but I mean, yeah, it's okay. Well, think about the new energy efficient lights. Yeah. Notice how they're things like 16 watts and 20 watts. Oh, yeah, but and it'll say, that's right, it's the power consumption. That's right, exactly. And those older lights, yeah, the older incandescent, they were 100 watts, and it'll say the new one, 16 watts is equal to 100 watts, or something. Yeah, yeah. And it's because the watts, like you're saying, it is just the power consumption, not the brightness. So you can leave it on that, but then you've got to work it out with the efficiency to work out how bright it is. And who wants to do that? Really, I don't even bother with that. So it's much easier just to switch to a different unit, like lumens. So lumens are a common lighting unit, and you can just go down to luminous flux here in Revit to set those. Because it might be tempting to use watts because that's the one you'd be familiar with, but it's harder actually than using lumens. So if you get used to using lumens, then you can just take it up or down and you've got a common reference for your brightness. And if you find yourself going over 10,000 lumens, you're going too far.
I can't read. What's yours on now?
It's 3100. 3150, yeah. So, you can't read that?
It's the lighting on it. It makes it extremely difficult. I mean, I can see where I can make it out. Can you see it well? Yeah, I can read it.
Yeah. Yeah, you should be able to read that from where you are. Yeah. I mean, if I don't have my glasses, there's no way I can read it.
It's really pale though, like the text on the... Sorry, I have to get you to see really clearly like that.
Oh, right.
And my sight is bad, but it's not that bad. I know it every time I go with it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can definitely, with my glasses, I can read it from back there, and yeah.
Maybe it's the transition from looking here and then looking out.
Yeah, yeah. So anyhow, as long as you can play with that value, I'm going to double it basically. So I'm going to make it 6100, and then I'm going to change all of those other lights to my new one, and then just render again. And you might be surprised sometimes how high you need to make that to get the lights to come up against the sun. The sun is really, really bright. It's, and very few man-made light sources get anywhere near it. I mean, things at sports grounds and you know, lighthouses and things like that do, but not the sorts of lights you use unless you're doing, you know, metal halides and things like that. They don't get anywhere near as bright as the sun. And you can see it in here actually. I mean, we've got the shades down, but those areas that are brightly lit really stand out. So we're starting to see now the light's doing something. You can see in these areas we're finally getting some light from these lights. Okay, like I said, if you're going above 10,000, then you're essentially going outside of the realms of realistic lighting. But sometimes that's what you have to do. So just be aware of that. You're cheating really if you do that, but sometimes that's what you have to do. So I've gone up to 12,000 now, and I'll go and render again. Oh, that's right. If you need to go, that's right. Sorry? Oh, they're all in the CAD2 folder on the P drive, and I'll put them all up onto YouTube eventually as well. So? The ones that I've done previously, just not today's. So today's I'll put up onto YouTube later. Denny Lee. D-E-N-N-Y. Lee, L-A-A. Yep, sure, no worries. Okay, so notice how now I can really start to see what those lights are doing. And I could possibly even take the exposure down, also increase the exposure value, which is making it less bright. Okay, so using adjust exposure now, I can fine tune that. Probably a bit dark. And if you have to, you can try taking the highlights down when you've got really bright sunlit areas. That's really all you can do sometimes. But it's something just to watch out for. Once you start playing with these highlights, midtones and shadows sliders, it can make the views look a bit unrealistic. So try and do as much as you can just using the exposure value at first, and then later on have a look at those. But then another good one I can show you is the white point value. So if we go to cooler, you can see it's going to make it have more of a blue tone, going to warmer, more of an orange tone, so that'll give us more of an impression of sunlight. But if you want more a look of artificial light, sometimes cooler is better, especially if it's lots of fluorescence. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, incandescence. Exactly, yeah, and different kinds of lights. So fluorescents tend to have fairly cool light, incandescents fairly warm, LEDs touch warm, but not as warm as incandescents. And yeah, so there we are. And then, oh yeah, finally, I'm going to show you how to save those. So if you've finished rendering and you want to bring it back, when you go back into that dialog box, if it shows you still the shaded view, you can just click show the rendering to bring back the last one. It only works with the last render, but it's a really handy option. And then you'll see you've got the option to either save to project or export, or do what I do and do both. So with save to project, it'll ask you for a view name. I'm just going to leave it on the default there, it doesn't really matter, so that's okay. And then the other option is export. And then if you've been playing around with Photoshop and other programs like that, you'd know about these file formats. So JPEGs are okay actually, TIFFs are a little bit better. But I'm just going to use JPEG for now and save it into your CAD2 folder. Oh yeah. Yeah, well it's just better quality overall for everything, yeah. But they're much bigger files. And yeah, so look, technically you should use TIFFs for everything, but honestly, most people would struggle to pick the difference. So if you really, if it's just for preparation, wouldn't worry. Yeah, no, but TIFFs are also a bit fiddly. They've got lots of complicated settings, so JPEGs sometimes are a really good all-round option. Okay, so that's now saved as a separate file, and I can always get back to it just by finding that file. Okay, so there it is. In that folder, here we are, test render. And then, if you're wondering what that saved to project did, I just close this. Within this Revit file now, we've got a renderings category that's been added in the project browser. And you can see there it's saved within Revit, which means that when you save the Revit file, come back to it and you've always got the image there as well. So it's good to do both. And that's probably as far as we need to go with rendering for now. There'll be lots more we can look at later once you've tried out some different renders. So if you've done the modelling for your design, you should just be able to take different camera views and use the same lighting setup for all of them, and get the renders that you need, fairly easily, because maybe you need 6 renders. 6 perspectives. And they need to include natural and artificial lighting. But notice, I'm fairly sure, so like I said, Tanya's changed this a little bit, but I don't think she would have changed the thing about rendering. Yes, I'm pretty certain that it would still have only... Oh, it does say 6 renders, so just change it. Because I normally say some of them need to be rendered, but you can do some with other graphics as well. So let's see here. Yeah, okay, so I might change that and let you do some that are not rendered, because graphics is a good thing to know about as well. Just having, say, hidden line and shaded views sometimes is a good thing to think about as well. But I suppose maybe for now I'll just leave it as 6 rendered views and talk to you about that more next week. Yep. But like I was saying, if you've got the model done, it's really just making the cameras and then having the time to render. Just maximise one of them. So just click on, yep, that'll do it. Yep. Sure. So the very last thing before I finish is rendering cloud. So if you've got your Autodesk account still working, then you can use that rendering cloud option, and it'll render really high quality on the computers at Autodesk in America, and it's much faster than rendering on your local machine. And as students, you've got unlimited access to that facility.
And what then you just download
Yep. It gives you a login. You just log into your thing, your account, and it has a web page there. You can just download all the vendors directly.
The actual process of downloading
No, it's instant. I mean, downloading a JPEG, it takes 30 seconds. Yep. And that's a really good option. And I mean, with bigger projects, probably more than this, because bigger projects can take, in the past, days to render, just one image. And on their computers, I've never seen it take more than an hour. Yep.
And will it pop up when it's finished if you do this in time?
Oh, yeah.
Your render's done now.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. But you've got to be signed in for that to work. So I might show you that later as well. Yeah. So just check that your account's working, the one you use to download the program. But with a project like this, you can probably render most of it locally pretty quickly. But just allow render time anyway. It's not a, it's not a quick thing, but still quicker than rendering by hand. And so just maybe the very, very last thing. I know I've said that a few times, but this will be the last one. If you've got a situation like this, where you may not get a lot of natural light, then really think about getting enough artificial lights in there for it to render properly. You can still use sun and artificial. So I'll get some light coming in through this window here, but nothing like before because this isn't north facing. You're basically looking south there. And you can see here, even with this small model, it's starting to take a little while to render. Also, when it's rendering, the first half that it doesn't show you anymore is doing the indirect lighting. So once it gets past that 50% mark, then it'll start to show you the finished lighting. The indirect lighting is the bounced light. So when the light, especially say, is coming in from the windows, from the sun, it's going to bounce off the floor or the surfaces that it hits and bounce into other areas and indirectly light those things. So that's why it has to do this calculation initially to process all of that, and then now it's going to start lighting. Okay, so again, those speckles in that light are just because of the quality. Even on medium, it's going to give you those, but as the quality goes higher, those are going to be reduced, but the render time is going to go up to, I mean, on maximum or best, that'd be at least an hour, I'd say, or at least half an hour maybe with a model like this, but it could be an hour to do that, which is obviously a bit of time, but still so much faster than doing it by hand. And I've had to go back to doing a bit of hand rendering lately, and honestly, I don't know how people who do it, all their rendering that way can make a living, because it's just so slow. When you're doing big, if you've got to do big sheets, you're looking at a night for each rendering, which is just too much. Exactly, that's right, exactly. It's the changes really that take up most of the time. Yeah. So I'll finish that there anyway.